To start with, this is an older Seattle facet that I was fortunate enough to get as my first faceting machine about 12 years ago, and I've permanently mounted it to an OMF machine that I bought from Zane Hoffman. And I've made a few modifications. Let me switch the thing to the laser. Can you see the little red dot? This arm right here is one of the modifications that I made. I didn't feel like the stabilizing arms on the concave machine were as stable as I wanted them. And I'm a fanatic about a piece of equipment being rigid and functioning properly. So I replaced it with a 1/2-inch stainless steel rod. I made a slide and mounted the caliper here, or the little micrometer here to it. So this can slide up and down that shaft. This knob right here will let the shaft come up and down. And I also put, if you can see by the end of the chuck here, I put a wider platen on the end of that micrometer. And that made it a lot easier for me to hit it up high and then slide down that faceplate. So those are little modifications. I also like to have the motor, since I had a lefty facet, that I wanted to sit on that side of the machine. So I've mounted the motor in a little different way. And I've taken the drip pan, or the drip container, and put some special solution in mine. If you've seen the video, I made a spoof video for Zane Hoffman where we used a bottle of Yukon Jack as the drip tank. And for those of you who have seen the video, I want you to know it was water in the tank. It was not the real stuff. But the secret was you have to test the water several times during each stone. And the stone gets better looking all the time, by the way. By the end, who cares what a facet even means? So the drip tank that I have here, I have one of those little lock line. You can get that little plastic lock line. I love that stuff because you can bend and shape it and put it wherever you want it and it stays in place. And the splash guard, Zane uses a piece of PVC, and I've taken the time to round all the corners off of it and polish it on my polishing machine so that it's a little bit smooth, it's easier to clean off. Then the next machine, this is the Fantasy machine. You have to use your own Ultratech mast on it. And since this is new and it's been discussed on some of these faceting lists and forums a couple of times, people aren't really familiar with some of the things that it can do or what apparatus you can attach to it. The base plate that the mast mounts on is made by Ultratech and for Ultratech. But because of the way that mounts, you're really not limited to just an Ultratech mast. Now, they have some stabilizing mechanisms specifically designed for the Ultratech mast, which facilitate using the machine just as you see that there. But you could change the nut out on the bottom of a Facetron mast and use it. You'll have to come up with a stop mechanism like the OMF machine has on it so that you bring your quill up against the stop and come down. You can also put an XS3 mounts in the same way. And really, with a little bit of adapting, you could probably put a lot of different mast types on this machine. But the machine itself, this is a Fantasy machine. He has two models of this. One of them is a concave machine that's specifically set up just for concave work. And what I really like about this machine is the oscillation motor that sends the little mandrel in and out is fully variable, and the travel distance is variable as well. So you can get a travel that goes about 1 1/8 all the way down to 0. You can put that wherever you want. The only downside of the OMF machine is it's fixed. It only travels about 3/8 of an inch. Something to understand if those of you who do concave work or maybe you've been interested in it, you need to understand what it does to light. These are just two simple drawings. The first one shows you a crown facet that's concave cut. When light hits that, it's going to diverge the light. It's going to split it apart. Whereas most of the time in your flat faceted pattern, the main goal is to take light that comes from the top, kind of focus it towards the center of the stone and then pump that brilliance right back at you. Well, concave faceting does that in a different way. And I'm not going to say it's better or flat faceting is better. There's a viable market for both stones. It's just your individual preference. But when light hits that crown facet, it will diverge it. You need to know that so that you know where to go to capture it back again. And on the drawing to the right, light's going in through the table, and as it hits a pavilion facet that's curved, likewise it does the same thing. So you just have to keep that in mind, and I am working on a book of concave facet designs that will hopefully come out soon. But it's a lot of work to do this because you can't just punch something like this into GemCAD. I've got another program that I do these drawings with to show you what concave facet line drawings look like, and it's not easy. So that's a work in progress. You have to understand this concept if you're going to concave facet, because you don't just start randomly placing concave facets. And contrary to what a lot of people tell you, you can't take a flat facet pattern and just directly transpose that into a concave facet. The main reason for that is a concave facet is finite. You are limited in size to the diameter and the depth that you cut for how wide that facet is. In other words, if you have just your standard round brilliant stone that you cut on a flat facet machine, you can use that same pattern, same index, and same angles for any diameter stone. You can't do that with concave faceting. You have to have everything in relation to the diameter of the mandrel. If you want to do a larger stone, you're going to have to proportionately increase the diameter of the mandrels that cut that, because curved surfaces intersect in a very different way than flat surfaces do. And if you want to do a really large stone, you have to keep that in mind as you're designing. So another thing that's beneficial, you know what sweeping the wheel is when you flat facet. That's where you take your quill with the stone and you're sweeping back and forth with your stone. It's a good idea to always cut that way, but it's critical when you get to the polishing stage. If you came down on that lap and you just stayed in one spot, you're going to end up with striated straight lines. That's the reason why we sweep side to side, is because you create a little bit of cross-hatching in that pattern. That's what gives you the absolute flat. The same theory applies in concave faceting. So that's why concave machines don't just spin the mandrel fixed in place. They oscillate the mandrel back and forth. It's to create some of that cross-hatching. So I am going to do a little comparison here between the OMF machine and the Fantasy Cup machine, or the concave machine that Ultratech offers. And to give you an idea of what that is, one of the complaints that I hear is that somebody's cutting this concave facet, but they're getting this scratch that looks like it's just straight across. Even though the little thing is oscillating in and out, it seems like those scratch lines are all still straight across. This is the reason why. What I did was I put a V-groove dop a V-dop in the quill. I stuck a pencil up against it, and I used a white Corian mandrel, and I turned the machine on. This is the OMF machine. And I just marked as the thing went in and then back out. This is what you see. That's the path that it takes. Therefore, that's the shape and the pattern that you're doing in your stone as well. And you can see it travels. The OMF machine is fixed. You can't adjust the distance that it travels. It only goes about 3/8 of an inch in and out. And the revolutions in ratio to the length of travel or to the number of travels is also fixed on an OMF machine. That never changes. You can change the speed all you want to, but that ratio between the oscillation and the revolutions per minute never changes. That ratio is fixed. So this is what the pattern looks like. And you can see in this drawing, close to the middle where you see the shine is where the X's are beginning to cross. That's where I have gone in and out a couple of times. You can see you're not getting much of a crosshatch like you would if you were sweeping a wheel on a flat faceted stone. So that's the reason why some of you are still getting maybe some striated lines if you're using an OMF machine, or there are other machines like Facetron as well came out. I don't think they're still producing it, but they came out with a concave machine. I think Will did. Don't you have one set up? And if you want to see what that looks like, we have one set up in the demonstration area where you can see how Facetron accomplished it. It's a very, very simple concept and everything, and it was effective. If you are a tool guy and you kind of know what you're doing, you can make it work quite well. But this is travel distance of an OMF. This is on a Fantasy and Ultratech machine. This is set at the maximum travel distance, and remember I told you can adjust that all the way down to narrow if you want. If you put a little tiny burr in there that's a cylinder, you can get the thing to go back and forth just 1/8 of an inch. But you can see I've gone in and then back out probably twice. And you see what a nice cross-hatching I'm getting with the OMF or with the Fantasy machine. The reason for that is the drive motor that drives the mandrel is on its separate controller from the oscillation motor. So especially at your polishing stage where you typically, just like flat faceting, you slow your lap speed down for the polish. If you slow the mandrel down where it's turning slow, but you speed up the oscillation where it goes in and out more times per revolution, you get this nice cross-hatching. This will show you a full example. I've adjusted the width and the distance that it travels. You can accomplish that same cross-hatching no matter whether you're at the full distance, which it's going to be better. The top left-hand side, that's how much it marked. And you can see by the ruler, I've just kind of shortened it. There's a 3/4 inch one, there's just a little less than a 1/2 inch, all the way down to 3/16 of an inch. And 0, or you could just turn off the oscillation machine if you wanted to. So that's a cool feature that I think is a dramatic improvement in the way concave facets are cut. And you know, the kind folks, Joe Rubin at Ultratech, have solved that issue for us. And you know, they should be applauded. And let me just put in a plug for all of the manufacturers. This hobby can be frustrating. And you know that guy that walks through a supermarket parking lot and he takes his key, and the idiot that scratches your car, he lives in my faceting machine. Because on any given day, just out of nowhere, zip, right across a stone, something will come out of nowhere. And you know when that happens, there's always a physical reason for that. But sometimes we're a little too quick to say, well, it's the lap, you know, and blame it on the equipment. When really it may be contamination, it may be dust particles, like John said, falling off of a light bulb. It may be something that was on your finger. And I asked this carver one time, he's using several different grits, and I was asking him, I said, well, don't you separate things? He says, yeah. I said, well, how do you do it? Well, he says, well, I put a different grit on each finger. And I thought, and then he grabs the stone. So do your best to try to establish a good relationship with all of the manufacturing companies. They're there to help you. They want to sell their machines. They want to sell their product. Their main goal is to see you successful. They don't want to put out a product that scratches and make you try to guess why it scratches. I mean, their goal is to help solve those problems. The better the relationship that you have with them, the more their solution to whatever it is that's causing you a problem. And sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to sort out what it is you're doing, or maybe you're charging the lap a different way than what was intended. So take the time to get to know people. You have an excellent opportunity while Bob Dobo's here with Facet. Visit with him, get a relationship going with him, and if you have ever any problem with your machine or a lap that you've bought from them, give them a call and say, you know, I bought such and such from you. Oh, I remember you. You were at the Franklin Fasteners Frolic, you know. I mean, it goes a long ways. You catch a whole lot more flies with honey than you do vinegar.